Good evening, students. Today we're going to take a look at Unit 9, Lesson D, Graphing Quadratics Using Technology. The objective of the lesson, I can graph a quadratic function using technology. And then there's some key terms that are listed. These are all terms that we've already talked about in this chapter, but we're going to incorporate them in what we're doing today as well. First is a table. It's a table of values showing the points that are on the graph of the function. Vertex. We know now that the vertex is either the maximum or the minimum point of the quadratic function, depending on which way it opens. Zeros. Zeros are the point or the points where the quadratic function intersects the x-axis, also known as the x-intercepts. So our first example takes us through how we can find the vertex using our calculator. So in previous sections, you saw that we did the opposite of b over 2a and then substituted that in to find the vertex. So we did it algebraically. Now we're going to do it on the calculator graphically and let the calculator help us find it. So first thing, it says graph and find the vertex. First, make sure your window is set to the standard window. So before I do any graphing, I always want to make sure I press second y equals. We're not doing a scatter plot, so I want to double check that my plots are off, and they should be. But just to double check. Then I'm going to go to y equals, clear out any old equations or functions that are hanging out in here. Now here, where it says zoom 6, if I press zoom, and then choice number 6, notice choice number 6 is your standard window. So if I press 6, you will see that we've got now our coordinate plane, and it goes from -10 to +10 on the x-axis, and -10 to +10 on the y-axis. And that's going to work out just fine for these graphs that we're going to be doing. All right, so let's go through the process. It says next, press y equals and enter the equation. So I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to enter this equation into my calculator. So I'll have x squared minus 4x plus 7. And then I press graph. And here comes our parabola. So we're trying to figure out what is the vertex. Now we can look at it and we can kind of estimate, but the calculator will give us a little bit more of an accurate answer. In order to find the vertex, though, we have to tell the calculator specifically what we're looking for. So notice here it says decide if the vertex is a blank or a blank. So what we need to do is decide, and we've practiced this in previous sections also, is the vertex a maximum or is it a minimum? So that's what you want to put on these lines here. Minimum or is it a maximum? Because it says you will choose either 3 or 4 depending on what you decided in the previous step. So in the next step, we need to know. So if I look at this one, it's the lowest point on our parabola, so we know that this is a minimum. So now going back, it says press second trace. So second, and trace is this button right here under the screen. And notice we're going to tell the calculator to calculate. We have to tell the calculator, do we want to calculate the minimum or the maximum? Well, in this particular example, it was a minimum, so we're going to choose number 3. Now, if you go back over here to your notes, it says at the bottom of the screen, the calculator is going to ask you a series of 3 questions. Left bound, right bound, guess. So we have to go through this process. Here's my suggestion. I would use your arrow and move the cursor until it's flashing right on the vertex, or what looks like the vertex. So that's my target. Now I'm going to go and answer the questions. Left bound. I need to be on the left side of the vertex. So what I usually do is once I get to this target, now I press my left arrow a couple times, 2 or 3 times, and then hit enter. Now I'm going to arrow back to my target, back to my vertex. Then I'll answer the next question. The next question says right bound. So I'm going to press the right arrow a couple times. And what this does, and then press enter, is if you'll notice there's 2 dotted lines on the screen, it narrows down the region for the calculator. So we're telling the calculator, okay, look between these 2 dotted lines and find us the lowest point. In this case, that's the minimum of our vertex, or sorry, the minimum of our parabola or the vertex. And then the last question, the calculator asks just if you wanted to guess the answer. Well, of course we do. So we hit enter again. And it says, once you have gone through the process to answer those 3 questions, you will see an x equals and a y equals at the bottom of your screen. These are the coordinates of your vertex. Now, because of the way the pixels are and things on the calculator, 1.9999999, we'd really call that 2, 3. So that means that the vertex of this parabola is the point 2, 3. All right, let's do another one. So different equation. So we go to y equals, clear out the old one, and let's enter in this new one. So we're going to do negative 3x squared plus 6x minus 1. So negative 3x squared plus 6x minus 1. And then we can go ahead and graph that. This time you'll see that we have a downward opening parabola. There it is. And I want to find the vertex. So here's the point I'm looking for. In order to find it, I have to kind of give the calculator some instruction, some direction. So I know that since it's the peak of our parabola, it's going to be a maximum. So I do second, trace. I want to calculate, last example it was the minimum, but this example it's the maximum. So we choose number 4. And then the rest of the process is the same. So as I said, I usually suggest that you arrow over till you're targeted on your vertex, or close as you can to it. So I think that's my vertex. Then go through the questions. Left bound. Press your left arrow a couple times. Enter. Go back to your target, back to your vertex. I think it's about there. Then go to the question again. Right bound. So now we're going to hit the right arrow because we need to be on the right side of the vertex. Enter. Because we're giving the calculator the region for where it's supposed to find the highest point. Guess, of course. So then we press enter one more time. And we get that our vertex is the point 1, 2. All right, you'll do the U tries in class tomorrow, so let's move down. Example 2 we're going to move through rather quickly because you've already seen this a little bit. We've created and looked at tables for a few different types of problems, and then you saw them in previous sections from this chapter. But it says create a table of values for the function. Be sure to include the vertex and at least 1 point on either side of the vertex. So I'm going to go to y equals, clear that out, and put this new equation in. So that would be x squared plus 10x plus 16. And I can look at the graph because I want to find out what the vertex is because it says that in my table I should include the vertex. So I might as well find it. It's right here. So we'll go through that process that we did before. It's a minimum this time. So I'm going to do second, trace, calculate. Choice number 3 is the minimum. And then go through the process. Now, I don't see my cursor flashing anywhere, but this at the bottom tells me where my cursor is. So my cursor is at the point 0, 16. Well, 0, 16 is somewhere way up here. So I need to move it down. So I need to use my left arrow or my down arrow and move it. There it is. So if you don't see it, push the buttons, push the arrows a little bit till you get it. Okay, so here's my vertex. Here's my target. Now I answer the questions. Left bound. That means I need to push my left arrow and get to the left side of the vertex. Enter. Go back to your target. Here's my vertex. Next question says right bound. Now I need the right arrow to get to the right side of the vertex. Enter. Guess. Enter one more time. And I get a vertex of negative 4.99999, negative 9. So we'd call that probably negative 5. We'd round that to negative 5, negative 9. So I'm going to put that here. Negative 5, negative 9. Now I want to find points on either side of the vertex. So when I go to my table, second, table, here's my x values. Well, I know my vertex has an x value of negative 5. So I'm going to up arrow here till I see negative 5. Okay, there's negative 5. Slow down. Uh-oh. There we go. Negative 5, negative 9 is the vertex. Now I want to pick 1 point on either side of it. So I could do negative 6, negative 8, and negative 4, negative 8. Those are both points. So let's do this. So let's do negative 4, negative 8, and negative 6, negative 8. So now I have the vertex and at least 1 point on either side of it. So if I were to graph this, I could plot the vertex, plot these 2 points, and I'd have a general idea as to the shape of my graph. And like I said, we've looked at tables already, so this is just a little bit of a refresher. There's one of those for you to do tomorrow in class. That's there. So let's go down to our last example, which is example 3, finding the zeros. Now we know from previous sections that the zeros are the x-intercepts, okay, the place where our graph crosses the x-axis. And we know how to find them algebraically. So if we wanted to do it algebraically, we could do it by factoring. We could do it by factoring. We could do the square root method. We could use the quadratic formula. Those are all ways that we can find the zeros or the x-intercepts algebraically. But we don't want to do it algebraically this time. We want to have our calculator help us out with it. So it says use your calculator to find the zeros of the function. Gives you that function, and we want to write the zeros. So we're going to press y equals and enter the equation. So y equals, clear that one out. Our new one is x squared minus 3x minus 10. And I graph. And I can see that it has 2 zeros, or 2 x-intercepts. Now for some of them you can look at the graph and clearly see what the zeros are. For some it's a little bit more difficult because it could be crossing at a fraction or a decimal. So we're going to go through the process to make sure that we're really exact and really accurate. Because this one has 2 zeros, we have to repeat the process over here 2 times. So we'll talk our way through that. So we're going to do second, trace again. But this time we're not trying to find the vertex. We don't want the minimum or the maximum. We're trying to find choice number 2, the 0. So we're going to choose number 2. Now this works very similar. It's going to ask us that series of questions. So what I suggest you do is we're not looking for the vertex. We're looking for where does it cross the x-axis. So I'm going to kind of hone in on my target there. That's the point I want to know. So that's my target. Now I answer the questions. Left bound. So I'm going to press the left arrow a couple times and hit enter. Go back to your target. Answer the question. Right bound. So now I hit the right arrow a couple times. Enter. Now it's got that little region. Now the calculator knows, okay, I want to see where does it cross the x-axis between these 2 dotted lines. That's what the calculator is kind of thinking about. Guess, and we hit enter, and we get -2, 0. So that's our first 0, or our first x-intercept. So -2 is one of them. Now we need to find this other one as well. So all we're going to do is that whole process again. Second, trace. We want to calculate. Choice number 2 is the 0. But this time, we need to move our target. We already know what this one is. So let's move our arrow over, until we get to this other point. Here it comes. So now I want to know what is this point. So there's my target. Now left bound means I'm going to hit the left arrow a couple times. Enter. Go back to the target. Right bound means I'm going to hit the right arrow a couple times. Enter. Guess. Enter. And we get 5 is the other x-intercept, or the other 0. Okay. So, 5 is the other one. So -2 and 5 are our zeros. You can write them as zeros that way. You could write them as x-intercepts, -2, 0, 5, 0. Both ways are accurate. Okay. So it looks kind of like, because of the nature of a parabola, that it goes above and below. That's why the left and the right sometimes gets a little bit confusing. But if you try and do it the way that I showed you, I think it might make it a little easier. Hone in on your target, and then if it says left, press your left arrow. If it says right, press your right arrow. Okay, let's do one more. Use your calculator to find the zeros of the function, 2x squared minus x minus 1. So I go to y equals, clear that old equation out. My new one is 2x squared minus x minus 1, graph. So here's my parabola, and I want to figure out what are the zeros. So this one kind of looks like it might be a fraction, because here's -1 and it's not quite there. This one might be a +1, but we're going to be safe. We're going to double check. So we go through the process. Second, trace. What are we calculating? Well, we're not trying to find the vertex this time. We're trying to find the zero. So we press choice number 2. Now, it doesn't matter which one you do first. I'm going to do this one first. So I kind of want to get as close as I can. So I think that's the that's the first 0. That's my target. Now I answer the questions. Left bound, so I'm going to press the left arrow a couple times. Enter. Go back to the target. Now it says right bound, so I'm going to hit the right arrow a couple times. Enter. And then enter one more time, and we get the first 0 as negative 0.50. So it's at negative 1/2. So you can write that as negative 0.5 or negative 1/2. Negative 0.5. Ooh, that's messy. Hold on, sorry. Let's try that again. So our first 0 is negative 0.5, negative 0.5. Sorry about that, pen's not cooperating. Now we need to find the other one because I also see that it crosses in another spot. So I do the process again. Second, trace, calculate. At the vertex this time, we're looking for the other 0. So I press 2, arrow over to that other 0, hone in on your target. That's the one I want. Then answer the questions. Left bound, so I'm going to press the left arrow a couple times. Enter, go back to the target. Now it says right bound, so I'm going to press the right arrow a couple times. Enter, enter again, and my other 0 is at positive 1. So the two zeros, or the two x-intercepts here, are negative 5 and positive 1. And again, you can write those as x-intercepts, ordered pairs, or you can write them this way. Both are, actually that's negative 0.5. Both are accurate. Okay, so we can do it algebraically, and now we can let our calculator help us do the work. Okay, these U-tries you'll do tomorrow in class. Be sure to answer the questions here at the bottom. Okay, so your teacher knows what you may need help with, what you can do, and what you still don't know how to do, and then remember all of your options for getting extra help. And we will see you tomorrow in class. Don't forget to bring your calculator with you so we can practice these. Have a good night.